right, in this short video, I'm going to be answering two questions. The first question is this: what's the difference between a Raspberry Pi Pico and a Raspberry Pi? And the second question is this: when do I use a Raspberry Pi Pico and when do I use a Raspberry Pi when I have a project? To answer these two questions, first we need to understand what's the difference between a microcontroller board and a single board computer. All right, the Raspberry Pi Pico is considered a microcontroller board, while the Raspberry Pi is considered a single board computer. Now, let's look at what each of these stands for. So the microcontroller boards and the single board computers are essential for embedded systems and robotics. Choosing the right one depends on project requirements. All right. Now, what is a microcontroller board? It's a compact system with processor, memory, and peripherals. It is designed for real-time and low-power applications. The different types of microcontroller boards, example is the Arduino, ESP32, and the Raspberry Pi Pico. So the Raspberry Pi Pico is an example of a microcontroller board. Now, what is a single board computer, SBC? It is a full-fledged computer with CPU, RAM, storage, and ports. It runs an operating system. So the operating system could either be a Linux or Windows. Now, here are some examples of the single board computer. Example is the Raspberry Pi. So a Raspberry Pi is an example of a single board computer. Why? Because it consists of CPU, it consists of RAM, it has storages, and it has several ports. Another example of a single board computer is the Jetson Nano. And the third example is the BeagleBone Black. So these are examples of single board computers. Now let's look at the difference between the microcontroller boards and the single board computers. You can also refer to them as microcontroller units and single board computer. All right. For the MCU, in terms of processing power, it's quite low. So their processing powers are quite low, while the SBCs have a high processing power. The OS support, most MCU does not require an OS to operate. However, for the case of the Raspberry Pi Pico, you can install a MicroPython which serves as an OS in the microcontroller. Whereas for the SBC, it has a full-fledged OS system, for example, Linux or Windows. For memory storage, the MCU have very low memory storage or capacities in kilobytes and megabytes, while the SBC, they have memory and storage capacity in gigabytes. For connectivity, you can connect your components or devices to your MCU using your GPIO pins or your UHF. All right. In case of the SBC, you can connect with it through Wi-Fi or the HDMI cables or ports. Power consumption for the MCU is quite low compared to the SBCs. Now, common uses: the microcontroller units are used for IoT robotics, while the SBCs are used for AI, vision processing, and big-time automation. Now, let's look at how to choose the right one for our robotic project. Now, for example, we have a traffic light here. So for this traffic light, you're just looking at a simple traffic light that just controls when the car should move from red, orange, green, all right? Controls maybe 4 lanes or 3 lanes. You could use a microcontroller unit in this particular project. Whereas if you're thinking about an intelligent traffic light system that not just controls the movement of traffic, but also incorporates computer vision and AI, either for plate number recognitions or for some statistical analysis, counting the number of cars that have passed through the lanes and all of that, looking at when the lane is busy and all of that, then you need something like the SBC, single board computer for this particular application. Let's look at another example. Okay. Now, coming to agriculture. So, for your smart irrigation system, where you just want to control how your water gets to your plants, an MCU, that is microcontroller unit, is okay for a simple smart irrigation system. Whereas if you are looking at a smart robot for disease detection, you require a single board computer in this case. Why? Because you'll be handling things like computer visions and AI, either for disease detections and all of that. So you will need an SBC in this case. Now, bear in mind, in some cases, you might need to combine the MCU and the SBC. Now, let's look at this smart autonomous robot. Okay, for this smart autonomous robots, it will combine the MCU and the SBC. Now, the SBC can be used for computer visions, just like object detection and more complex algorithms. The SBC can take care of that. When we think about the connection to sensors, reading your environmental parameters using sensors, then you can use your MCU in that case. So the MCU probably can read your ultrasonic sensors to measure the distance from your robot to a particular object, all right? The MCU can be used for controls of the movement of the robot. Why? Because they are more applicable for real-time application. When you want speed, the MCU can handle such tasks. But when you want large data processing, then you need to use the SBC. For more complex algorithms, you need to use the SBC. In conclusion, the MCU are best for low power, real-time tasks, while the SBC are for AI, multitasking, and high computing. Hence, for you to determine what to use for your particular project, either example of the MCU, which is the Raspberry Pi Pico, or the single board computer, which is the Raspberry Pi. You need to determine what your project needs, and hence it will help you determine which is the right one for you. I hope this helps and this has answered the question. So again, the Raspberry Pi Pico is a microcontroller board, while the Raspberry Pi is a single board computer, all right? And if you're doing a very big task that has to do with image processing, visions, computer visions, the SBC will be more suitable for that. While you're doing some low application task or real-time task, then your Raspberry Pi Pico will be more suitable for that. Thank you, and see you in my next video. Bye.